You know that feeling, right? When you meet someone new or someone you only sort of know, it always begins the same. A polite, "Hey, how's it going?" or "Hi, nice to meet you," followed by the usual small talk questions like, "So, what kind of work do you do? Which department or team are you in?" And after a few exchanges, silence slowly creeps in, that awkward, heavy pause we all dread. But here's something you've probably never realized. The silence isn't the problem. It's the fear behind it. I've experienced that moment countless times, not just in the office, but in all kinds of social situations. Like catching up with a distant cousin you haven't seen in forever at a wedding, or trying to strike up a friendly conversation with a stranger at a cafe or bar. And it always made me wonder, what if you could talk to anyone at any time and never run out of things to say? The truth is, most of us deal with some form of social anxiety, and that nervousness quietly shapes how we interact. We all experience it differently, but I somehow managed to level up to the expert mode version, completely unprepared and without any cheat codes. So, over the years, I started experimenting, observing, practicing, learning, and eventually I discovered 3 powerful methods that help me speak to anyone confidently and avoid those awkward silences almost every single time. Well, almost every single time. Initially, I blamed myself for being too shy, not confident, and just a little bit socially inept. But like everyone else, I was the exact opposite around people I was comfortable with. So I asked myself, what's really going on? How can one person have such opposite personalities? What I realized was that even though I'm an introvert, I don't have 2 personalities. And it wasn't even a confidence problem. It was a skill problem. I simply hadn't mastered the art of small talk. And just like any other art form, like learning a new instrument or writing poetry, speaking to people is a skill that can be developed with enough practice. Through years of trial and error, and by observing people better than me, I quickly understood there are only 3 things you need to do to speak to anyone fluently and never run out of things to say. And the best part? You can implement these 3 things almost immediately. What would you do if someone said the following? "I went golfing over the weekend." You can either say, "Oh, that's interesting," and then stare into space, listening to the sound of silence. Or you can ask intentional follow-up questions. For example, where do you usually play? How long have you been playing golf for? This will naturally lead to further follow-up questions like, do you play competitively? Are you part of a club? Now I get it, you probably don't care much about golf, but that's not the real point here. What truly matters is that this moment shows you're sincerely curious about what the other person is sharing, or at least that's the impression you're creating. And here's the secret most people miss. Genuine curiosity is more magnetic than perfect words. When you approach a conversation this way, it instantly removes those awkward silences and empty pauses. It also gives you a quiet advantage, the ability to guide the direction of the talk, to lead it wherever you want it to go naturally. Because if you think about it carefully, a conversation is really just a sequence of questions and answers. And the person asking most of the questions is usually the one gently steering the entire interaction. But here's the catch. Not all questions are equal. To create real connections, you need to ask the right ones. And this is exactly where the second method comes into play. A common myth is that to become better at speaking, you simply have to speak more. But like many of life's strange paradoxes, the truth is the opposite. To improve how you communicate, you must actually learn to stay quiet and listen more deeply. That means practicing active listening, not just hearing words, but fully engaging with them. Doing nothing else but being present in that moment, because real listening is the foundation of meaningful conversation, because it's easy for our minds to wander and start preparing our response, rather than actually listening to what's being said. And that leads you to say something completely irrelevant, adding yet another moment to your collection of awkward ones. But if you listen intently, you can ask the right questions and create a free-flowing, more interesting conversation for everyone involved. As the famous quote goes, most people don't listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. Don't be that person. There are enough of those already. The cherry on the cake is when you find common ground. We instantly click with people who share similar backgrounds or interests. Sometimes it's easy, like realizing you both share a love for golf or the same kind of music. Other times, it takes a little more effort. But even then, with the right curiosity and by asking thoughtful questions, you'll always uncover something that connects the two of you. And once you discover that common thread, guide the conversation toward it. From there, it begins to flow naturally, almost effortlessly. Because when 2 minds connect on shared ground, words start to feel lighter, almost like they speak for themselves. But let's be honest, not every conversation will turn into something magical. There will be times when it simply fades out. Moments filled with awkward silence that feel longer than they actually are. And when that happens, remember this: it's completely okay. Learn to be at peace with the quiet, because at the end of the day, silence isn't your enemy. It's just space between thoughts, and like all moments, it eventually passes. By practicing these 3 methods consistently, you'll notice something powerful. You'll begin to talk to anyone with ease, confidence, and flow. and you'll almost never run out of things to say.